Yeah, I'm guessing that it's also people connected to the YouTube channel. So if we have more people there, I think. Let me
Okay,
know.
we should be good to go.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone to
Don't
this
forget you're
panel.
muted, Kari.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I can hear you, Pete.
Yeah, no, I muted myself. I'm gonna wait for a bit.
Okay. Okay. So welcome everyone to this panel discussion called Private Sector, What Are My Options? So we have really an amazing panelists that they accept our invitation to be here today. I'm gonna briefly introduce the panelists and the platform because they're going about their journey and how were the steps that they followed to be where they are today. So the first panelist, I'm gonna start randomly. I'm not in specific order. So the first one is Vido. He works at the I don't know if I'm pronouncing this name correctly. ASICS, right?
ASIS.
ASIS. Meteorologists since October 2019, and he also earned a partial degree and a minor in energy business and finance from the University of Pennsylvania. We also have the Dr. Alicia Wasula, which is a certified consulting meteorologist and owns his own firm, which is called STM Weather. And she earned her bachelor, master, and PhD degree in atmospheric science from the University at Albany. And the last panelist for today is Andrew Markowitz, and he's working now at Xcel Energy in Denver as a meteorologist, and he also is the chair of the AMS Board of Private Sector, and he has a bachelor degree in meteorology with a minor in energy, business, and finance from the University of Pennsylvania. I think that I forgot to mention about Max Vido. He's also the co-chair of the AMS Mind the Gap committee. So with this short introduction, I know it's very short, but I'm gonna leave them to talk about their history and their journey. So I don't know if they want to start in a specific order they want to start, or the same order that I introduced yourself already, or if you want to jump in.
I can get started. Stay in order here. So thanks for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here today with the University of Wisconsin. So I consider myself an early career meteorologist, having graduated in 2016. My passion for weather came from East Coast winter storms during my childhood, specifically the big ones that impacted Philadelphia. Go Eagles this weekend. But I like science and weather enough to pursue meteorology in college, and I graduated from Penn State, as Kari said, in 2016. I started my career working at AccuWeather as an operational meteorologist for about three and a half years, and then I left AccuWeather to move to a company called ASIS, where I've been now for over 3 years. And I moved, as you said, back in 2019. So ASIS is headquartered in Indianapolis. We have a couple satellite offices, one in Minneapolis, so kind of close to you guys up there in Madison, one in Benson, Arizona, which is close to Tucson, and then also one in Raleigh, North Carolina. And you could say I'm an energy meteorologist. So ASIS is an energy company that provides services to electric cooperatives around the country. And cooperatives are, if you don't know, you probably don't, are more rural-based, not-for-profit electric utilities. So ASIS tries to reduce the financial exposure to these cooperatives whose main purpose is to provide low energy prices, low energy rates to their customers. So energy prices, energy rates, they're determined in markets where typical supply and demand curves can be applied, just kind of like the stock market, just specific to energy. So if it's super cold or hot outside, that will increase energy demand and energy prices will go up. And during the spring and the summer, when it's not as hot, not as cold, energy prices are, or spring and fall, energy prices are a little bit lower. So my weather forecast that I provide to the traders that we have here at ASIS, give them an idea of what energy demand will look like. Also supply too, when you think about things like wind energy and solar energy, that generation would be considered supply. So many energy companies hire meteorologists, and I'm sure Andrew will kind of give his background. He works for an energy company as well. The types of forecasts and responsibilities of the meteorologists at these energy companies depend on the financial goals of the company. And like I said, we work for not-for-profit companies, so the trades that go on, the books we manage are a little bit more risk adverse. But then you'll get more speculative companies that are for-profit, where they're trying to make money off of every little model run, like the 384 GFS. So it all depends, what the goal of your company is, where you're working on the specific responsibilities you have. And I guess I'll get more into that later, but I'll stop there and pass it on to Alicia or Andrew.
That's good. I guess I'll go next because I was next in the introductions. So thank you for having me today. I'm just going to take 1 second. I have a slide here just for a little visual while I'm talking. So let me know if you guys can see that okay. All right.
Yep, that's
awesome.
good.
Great. So I, unlike Max, I spend my time not forecasting the weather, but looking at past weather events. So I own STM Weather, which was formerly Shade Tree Meteorology. That's where the STM comes from. I am a sole proprietor, and I specialize in forensic meteorology. So I spend my time looking at past weather events in the context of litigation. So if there's a lawsuit that involves the weather in any way, we may be called in as experts. And a lot of times people think that's always, testifying at court. And honestly, that's a very small percentage of what I spend my time doing. Most of the cases that I work on, we're providing weather information to the attorney in order that they can kind of formulate their case. And in that time, most of them settle out of court. So really, I only testify at a handful of trials per year. Like I mentioned, I am a small business owner, so that's a whole other topic of conversation we could have. I have 1 employee, soon to be 2. I'll be taking on another part-time employee in the spring. So truly the small business side of the private sector. I also contract, support staff to do bookkeeping and that kind of thing as well. So for forensic analyses, we work on all different types of weather cases, but I am based in the Northeast United States. So if you look at the bottom left slide panel there, that just gives you an idea of what my personal experience is in my firm. If you ask the forensic meteorologist in another part of the country, say in the Southeast United States, they would have a very different distribution of cases. But because we're in the Northeast and I'm about a day's drive, I'm in just outside of Albany, New York, the capital, about a day's drive from lots of big cities around here. And so that makes it really reasonable if I do have to travel to a trial. And so that attracts a lot of kind of what you would call local or regional business. And so we deal with a lot of winter weather events, a lot of personal injury cases, motor vehicle accidents, and slip and falls. We deal with severe weather as well and flooding, and they can kind of at times be lumped into the same category. Sometimes there's severe weather and flooding in the same storm, which results in property damage. Also, we occasionally will deal with marine and tropical meteorology, but again, I mentioned there's other experts in other parts of the country who do that a lot more than I do. Usually if we see a hurricane case, it's because it came up the coast. For example, like Sandy, we had seen a lot of cases related to Hurricane Sandy damage back in the 5 years or so after that event. Then some really other neat cases, mostly civil, occasionally a criminal case. And then we also do other things as well. We do a lot of speaking engagements. We talk to landlord groups who are usually on the receiving end of the lawsuits that we see about hazardous weather preparedness and how to kind of prepare in advance for snowstorms. Same thing with commercial property management groups. And then the other thing, which I'm going to be doing a lot of in the next couple of weeks here, is school talks. We spend a lot of time talking to school children about weather preparedness. And, you know, I think that's just like a neat public service that a small business can provide, and just, you know, get involved with the local community. So I enjoy doing that as well.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Yeah, I think you're next, Andrew.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Markowitz, and like Max, I also work in the energy sector. I graduated from Penn State in 2019 with degrees in meteorology and energy business and finance, and that was basically combining two passions into one thing. Like, I had been very interested in the weather from a very young age. My forte was probably East Coast snowstorms, but any type of weather was very exciting, and I was happy to follow that dream. And I also was very interested in the energy sector because of my grandfather's past working as an economist for Exxon. So to put those two together, I found has been a very fulfilling career path. So this is actually my second energy job. Previously, I worked at Wood Mackenzie in Boston, which is a private company, and kind of has a similar objective as what Max is doing, where we're doing forecasts for you're basically looking at the weather and then you're applying that to see how does that impact energy demand, and then and as well as the supply in terms of wind and solar generation for different regions of the electric grid. And that kind of led me to take this job here in Denver, Colorado at Xcel Energy, which actually services Western Wisconsin, just outside of you guys, as well as 7 other states from the Texas Panhandle all the way to the upper Midwest. And my number one goal every single day is to go in and to make sure that the lights stay on across our territories. So in order to do that, we basically have tasks that are divided between a meteorologist who does short range and someone who does long range. And the short range person will basically identify within 7 days, okay, are there certain regions where we're expecting inclement weather? So specifically, we care about things like icing or extreme temperatures, or very cold or very hot. Can we expect disruptions to electricity in these areas? And if so, you know, we try to get that in advance so that they can assign crews from either different parts of the state or different parts of the service territory. So, you know, they can be proactive instead of reactive. The other element of that is determining, okay, well, we know we're going to have this much energy demand for this period of time. Are we going to have adequate supply on the grid? So we do get supplies from solar and wind generation, which are growing very rapidly every single year. But we also have coal units, and then we import other units from different regions of the U.S. So there are times where we're like, okay, well, demand is going to be so high that we do not have adequate resources, or our wind farms are iced over. So in that case, we would have to figure out, okay, you know, we have to import this much, but we also don't want to spend more than we need to. So it's kind of a puzzle that you're going in and solving every day for the short range. And then the long range is looking at things like teleconnections, creating a national temperature map of where we think there are going to be above average, below average temperatures, and can kind of make assumptions as to how that would impact energy demand, and then kind of giving them advance notice of when there is going to be a high impact event. So for example, this past December, you guys all remember that major Arctic front that affected pretty much the entire country. And basically, as the long range guy, you know, we were trying to identify the pattern more than 2 weeks out. And basically in the 11 to 15 range, we had a map that had those dark blues coming in. So the idea of that is, you know, just giving people a heads up. And, you know, that's something that's not really taught much in school. You know, I'd recommend learning as much as you can on your own about the long range. And, you know, I feel like it was a pretty unique challenge. So every single day I feel like I'm walking in and it's a pretty meaningful job. And, you know, it's something that, you know, you can actually see it helping the millions of people that are within our service territory. And for me, it's just challenging as a forecaster, just looking at different things, going from the East Coast, which in itself is challenging, to places like Denver, which is an entirely different ballgame. So all in all, I very much enjoy this job, and, you know, I'm excited to see what's to come in the energy sector. I think it's very exciting, with especially the bigger push to renewables in the next 20, 30 years.
You're muted, Kari.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you everyone for those amazing introductions. So I'm gonna just start open the discussion to all the students here. So if anyone have a question, just feel free to unmute yourself or just post that in the chat. I know that Pete, you are in with Judas, if someone posted any question there, please just let us know. So meanwhile, people ask questions. I don't know if anyone have any question right now.
There is one on the YouTube stream if nobody on the Zoom has one yet.
Okay, go ahead.
From Hamish Prince, he says, I'm really interested in what data you all use. Is it the publicly available products that are online, for example, National Weather Service, GFS, ECNWF, or do you or your clients have additional data, analysis, or personal WRF setups to add value to their business and what is able to be offered?
Max, are you going to start?
You can jump in, and then
Okay.
I guess Andrew and I will probably be able to tag team this one for the energy industry.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for forensic meteorology, because we're working on past weather events, we're heavily involved with observations. So not a lot of numerical models, only when needed or in certain types of cases, but I rarely would even deal with that. So instead, what I'm spending my time doing is digging so deep into observations, things that may not seem important when you're ingesting huge volumes of data into a numerical model, although they are, they're kind of just on a much larger scale, become incredibly important when you're analyzing data for a specific case for a particular location. So questions like, what is the data source? How is the data cited? Where is the data related geographically to your incident site? Is it representative, geographically to what's going on? Is the data quality controlled? What other questions would you have? One of the big ones for us getting the data accepted into court proceedings is that we often need a certification from either NOAA or from New York State, like a mesonet, for example. So some state mesonets offer a certification as well, just attesting that the data is a certified copy of what they archive at their location and that it's been through standard quality control procedures and whatnot. So that's usually what we're using. We always go to NOAA and our certifiable data sources first. Even if you have a really high quality data set that is not certifiable, it can introduce a potential issue for you down the road, because then you as the expert have to explain to a judge or jury why that data is good, why you relied on it. And in the end, it's the decision of the judge whether to allow that data into court. So if it comes with a certification stamp, it's almost a no-brainer. And then we'll go to secondary networks that don't offer a certification affidavit, like if we need it in support of the first order types of stations that we would use.
Yeah, and I can jump in here in regards to the energy industry. We work with all kinds of historical data sets, and then also, as Alicia mentioned, forecasting data, numerical weather prediction data. We use all of it. So in terms of historical data, a lot of what we do in regards to training our load models for predicting energy consumption or energy use. We're looking at past temperature data for that. Also in terms of creating solar and wind forecast, where we're looking, we try to get our hands on all sorts of generation data from those sites, so we can predict forecast or predict generation out into the future. And then in terms of numerical weather prediction data, we're pulling from NOAA all the time. GFS sources, more of the short range, HER, NAM data, and bringing that into our system to produce certain forecasts. Some of the data is hard to get your hands on, like the ECNWF, in which case we usually go through a third-party vendor to access that data. You've probably heard these names before, like Maxar, IBM, AccuWeather. They all pay for that data, and then we can pay for a subscription to their their service to get that into our system. So being able to pull data, comb through the data, use the data is huge in our industry. And I'm sure Andrew may have something to add here as well.
Yeah, so at the 2 energy jobs I've had, it's pretty much a pretty similar process where number one, we look at historical data to see, okay, what days have similar conditions than what we're predicting for today or tomorrow. And you would filter out by things such as day of the week or the season. And we would have a tool that would generate a curve, and you would kind of make adjustments from there. You know, if you think the temperature is going to come in higher, or if you think there's going to be storms in the afternoon. So that's kind of an analog tool, like using historical analogs to predict demand. And then, as far as our forecasting, a lot of that is looking at the different models, like Max is saying NWP. So in the trading world, there's much more emphasis on the Euro suite than with the GFS. And for me personally, we actually have to do like a 12Z update to just kind of brief the traders as far as what happens, what changes are made. And then we actually do something interesting where it's called, what do we predict the model is going to do? Which it sounded kind of weird to me, because it's like, how can we're already forecasting the weather. How can you forecast what the model is going to do? So that's a little twist on kind of traditional forecasting you have to do in energy. So we do all that. And then we also kind of look at, what wind and solar generation are at different parts of the grid, and then plot that with where, all of our units are, and kind of calculate things from there. And we actually do have an in-house tool where we take the wind generation forecast, but then we filter out by different things that would impact generation. So for example, if you had an icing event that was coming in on Tuesday, we have this tool that would say, okay, these are the farms that would be affected and for how long. Thus, we would take down the wind generation by X%. We would also do that for overspeed too. Like if the winds are too strong, then turbines can't run. So a lot of what we do is just analyzing a lot of information out there. There is plenty. We do subscribe to the different vendors that Max is describing, with WSI and Maxar and Commodity Weather kind of being the big three. And we synthesize their data with, our analysis, and then our in-house tools kind of create the forecast that we distribute to our in-house traders and the commercial operations who try to keep the grid running.
Okay, there is another question from YouTube, from Stephanie. She says, what sort of experience would one need to work at your company? For example, bachelor's, master's, PhD, or on-the-job experience?
Yeah, so I can jump in here to start. I probably would not have gotten my job if I didn't have 3 to 5 years of forecasting experience. So that's, from my undergrad, and then also the three-ish years I worked at AccuWeather. So that was certainly something they were looking for. If I didn't have that, I think they were going to look for someone with a stronger computational background, with the ability to, program in multiple languages, do their own personal, price forecasting or energy load forecasting. So it's hard to get the perfect candidate with all the necessary skills, but to be strong in one area. And for me, it was a pretty good forecasting background. Written and verbal communication skills are huge. Being able to communicate uncertainty and risk in a clear and concise manner is very important. And I do want to stress, it's not just verbal, it's written as well. Most of my communications with clients goes through email or chat, and to respond in a timely manner is extremely important. So strong communication skills and forecasting was big for the position I'm in right now.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say about the energy sector is that you do not need to get a master's degree to get into to the energy sector. Certainly, it would help you to gain extra experience, but I think first and foremost, what they're looking for is that forecasting experience, which for me, like I got that with our campus weather service, working as an intern at AccuWeather for a summer, and just getting as much experience before I graduated to kind of get those extra years of experience that someone my age wouldn't typically have. So, I mean, these energy jobs are very competitive. So if that is the path you want to go on, you have to do something to kind of differentiate yourself from everybody in this room. So just gaining that forecasting experience and also understanding, you know, how you can apply that to these different audiences. And a lot of that comes with communication skills, you know, the ability to translate complex scientific information in a way that people can understand and they can take action on. Because I mean, the goal isn't to, you know, overwhelm someone with meteorological jargon. The goal is to, you know, tell them what they need to know in as concisely and as easily understood in a manner as possible. So that's what I would say. I mean, for me personally, getting that background in econ, business, and finance courses, I would say that gave me a leg up over, you know, someone my age who just had the straight up meteorology, just because it gives you the idea of, okay, well, I have the forecasting, but now I understand where these forecasts go to and how this can be applied. So, you know, I always advertise for students that, you know, if you're trying to get a leg up, do a meteorology +1, some other specialized skill that you can say that you or maybe a couple other people, you know, are like the premier people coming out of college. Nobody else really has that skill. So programming is another good one. Personally, you know, that's not really my forte, but having a good programming background will get you into, you know, any type of role, even if it's not meteorology or it's something where you can just apply your skills to something else. And a lot of programming, it's not just things like Python, it's Excel. Like if you can be really good at Excel, that would help you for pretty much any different career that you want to go down. GIS, I'd say, is another good one. I don't use that in my job personally, but I know a lot of jobs in the private sector do that. Statistics, data analysis, just any specialized skill that you can have that you can tack on to the skills you're already getting from a meteorology degree. You know, that's going to give you a leg up over your competition.
Andrew, I want to quickly emphasize before we move off from the energy field, the importance of at least a baseline knowledge of statistics. A lot of the people we work with on a day-to-day basis are finance people. And you get this in some other industries as well, like agriculture, like ag finance or insurance. A lot of these people have that finance background, that business background. Statistics is the common language between all of us. And we're always looking at, you know, how are things trending, time series analysis, what's, you know, the forecast compared to average, normal, what's the standard deviation of this event? You know, is it an extreme event? Is it only a one standard deviation event? These are things that the traders understand if they don't quite understand all the meteorological process behind the forecast. So I do want to emphasize, I mean, advanced statistics would be great, but at least a pretty solid background, I think, is important for some of the roles I've been in so far.
Yeah, those are great. And I think you'll hear from me that there's a lot of overlap in some of the skills required, even though we work in very different types of private sector jobs. So I'll just quickly talk about the forensic meteorology first, and then the small business kind of aspect, because I think there's two components here. So for forensic meteorology, you would need a bachelor's, of course, in meteorology. You'd need really strong data analysis skills. And when I say data analysis, I got to go back to the observations, right? I mean, it's how to understand what the observations are telling you and what the weaknesses in any data set is. So that is really important. You don't have to have a graduate degree. I do have a PhD. I found that my time in graduate school really helped me understand how to do a solid case study analysis, helped me with my writing and my communication. So I would recommend it, but there's plenty of people out there who do what I do, who are excellent at their jobs and don't have a graduate degree as well. So it could go either way there. It's just kind of a personal thing. And then again, you know, just like Max and Andrew, I spend my time communicating to non-scientists. So written and oral communication skills cannot be undervalued. Like, it is so important to be able to effectively communicate and understand your audience. So lawyers are very much word people. They don't want to spend the time understanding a graphic or an image or a figure if they don't need to for their particular application. You have to be able to deliver your message, what your key points are from your findings, in a really clear way and in bulleted points. You have to be able to write a solid written report that's not full of weather jargon and still communicates the fact that you did a sound scientific analysis. And then when you're talking to a jury, they say the average jury has, well, the jury has an average of a 10th grade education level. So you just don't know who you're going to get. You may have some very highly educated jurors, or you may not. You know, there may be some who haven't completed high school. And so you really have to be effectively able to communicate orally as well. And, you know, Max mentioned email. Most of my clients, I'm still briefing on the phone. So, you know, occasionally now we're starting to do Zoom a little bit more frequently since the pandemic, but most of the time they just want a quick phone call to discuss what my findings are. So that's all super important. On the small business side of things, if you're thinking of going into any kind of small business ownership, there's like a whole bunch of soft skills that are just absolutely essential. You have to be really, you know, pretty organized, self-motivated. You have to be willing to learn new things. I can't even tell you, I had a great mentor in my former boss before I bought this business, but not everybody has the benefit of that. So you need to seek out mentors who can help you sort of fill out some of these skill sets and where you can learn these kinds of things. I didn't know how to run a business when I first started working for him 3 years before I purchased the business. So 3 years in, when he was ready to sell and retire, I wasn't necessarily ready to take the reins, but I had to learn a lot of stuff. And so you have to be really, you know, like I said, those skills of self-motivation and organization and tackling new things are really essential to being a small business owner as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question from Ivan. Ivan, you can mute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the talk. My research is in climate predictability, so looking at more like seasonal to interannual predictions of not individual events, but generally what the weather is going to be like. And I'm interested in how that relates to, especially like energy generation with solar and wind, how much of that sort of prediction on the seasonal to interannual scale is happening, how much of a, you know, how much interest is there in that in the future as we move towards more renewables. Yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yes, so it depends on the customer you're serving, the book that's being traded, and what their interests are. Everyone's always trying to get a leg up on what prices are going to do next, energy prices, that is. And especially for things like natural gas, contracts are traded for like the month ahead. They're traded on monthly intervals. So, you know, the month ahead right now would be for March, the prompt month, March 2023. So our traders want to know what the trends are going to be, the weather trends are going to be during that month, and what that impact is going to have on price. So if we're looking at, you know, a very strong, you know, cooler period over the northern US, some of those higher demand markets, that would, if that was going to happen, it would likely lead to rising, you know, gas prices or energy prices for that prompt month. So, you know, our traders want the most. It's tough because there's only so much accuracy to these longer range forecasts, but our traders, you know, want any information they possibly have on what could impact prices for that longer range period. I've been hearing a lot recently that a lot of the energy traders aren't really making trades on seasonal forecasts that go out beyond like a month. They're not making as much, big financial decisions on a seasonal forecast for the upcoming summer, because they've seen that the predictability isn't good enough for it to be worth the risk. And then we're risking their position right now, at that long lead time. So, it's certainly useful. And once predictability increases for that longer range forecasting, I think it's going to be baked more and more into the daily forecast process for any meteorologist in the energy industry.
Yeah, so I echo a lot of what Max says. So at my previous job, we actually would do seasonal outlooks. So we would have a presentation that we did live to clients, and it would be basically what we're expecting for the next 3 months. So a lot of that was temperatures, which, as Max was saying, if you have anomalous cold in the winter or anomalous warmth in the summer, then that's going to lead to a spike in energy prices. And then from there, we also do precipitation forecast, because drought in places like Texas, that's going to be a pretty big deal, or like in the Midwest with the ag market as well. And then also for our company in particular, we care about the West Coast hydro, because that's one of the main sources of imports for, if we need to get additional capacity to our grid. And so if we see a drought coming, that's, something that we need to give them a heads up to see, oh, well, maybe we need to start planning for other routes, or if there's not extensive snowpack that builds during the winter. So those are things that kind of go beyond the seasonal forecasts you might see from vendors on the internet. I mean, aside from that, I would say we also try our best, at least in my old company, we would do forecasts for where we expect wind and solar generation to be as far as relative to normal. And that, it's just kind of a crapshoot, I think. I think there is a little bit of predictability when it comes to seasonal forecasting. Like, there are a lot of tools that you can kind of mesh together and create a composite. But, I'm just finding more and more that there just isn't enough predictability for most traders to really think that the risk of making a trade is worthwhile. I would say, once we get a month out, then I think a month and sooner, that's the point where I'd say we'd have decent predictability. But once you go beyond that, I think there's still a lot that we can learn, which, again, I think is pretty exciting about the energy sector. As someone who works with long range, there's still a lot that we don't really know, and a lot that we could do better.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that sub-seasonal period that you're kind of speaking in within that 1 month, but not quite the 15 days. So that 3 to 5 week period, there's a lot of interest there in providing value, because I think the traders are more willing to take a position in that shorter forecast horizon. Getting beyond that, a lot of it that more gets into like resource planning and more hedging, but stronger positions will be taken within that 1 month period. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for the responses. Kind of as a follow-up question, maybe going even farther out into the future, there's also some predictability at decadal scales, and I know that that gets more into the insurance side of things, or going, at this point it's very statistical. You're not talking about a single event, but how much interest in the really long range forecasts have you seen in the private sector?
There's
go ahead. Yeah, I can go for it. So one of the initiatives that Xcel Energy does is we have a goal that by 2050, we're going to be going carbon free. We were kind of one of the first, if not the first, energy companies in the US to undergo that policy. I think others have followed suit gradually since then. And so there is a lot of interest in terms of, what is the long-term climate going to be like? Is this going to be a viable climate for us to build wind turbines or solar farms in these parts? Maybe areas that are not able to, meet the demand just because of the current weather conditions. Maybe in 10, 20 years, if it gets a little bit windier or there's more sun, then we can have it in some places, or vice versa, where it is now, then maybe it won't. So there is a lot of interest in terms of long range patterns. I mean, that's not something that I deal with on a daily basis, but that is something that we do have to consider just when talking to resource planners who are trying to, make these long-term investments to achieve these goals. I mean, there are different oscillations you can look at to somewhat predict long-term patterns, but again, I think there is a lot that could be desired in terms of using that to predict what the weather is going to be like in the very long range.
Thanks for all your thoughts.
Yeah, Evan, I got asked about this yesterday in a meeting, and it's honestly a skill gap for me. I couldn't provide much expertise on 3 to 5 year climate prediction, but there is a role for it in the industry. It might not be as a operational meteorologist working the daily weather desk, but it could be in a position like load forecaster, portfolio strategist, power analyst. It might sound a little bit different than meteorologist, but the background of the meteorological education, or in the research at least, that you're into, is certainly applicable to the energy industry.
Yeah, I find it interesting because for so long, I think like climate and meteorology were separated because of those scales, and now with some of this climate forecasting stuff, it's much newer than the meteorology side of it, and so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from how people are doing things on that scale, and yeah, there's still definitely lots of improvement to be made for it, but I appreciate hearing your thoughts. And
people enter power agreements that go out 3 to 5 years, 10 years. So yeah, the need is certainly there.
Thanks.
I don't know if anyone have more questions, but I think I do have one. How common or how we can establish a collaboration between the private sector and academia?
Yeah, so I guess I can jump in here, and it's some of the work that we're doing with the AMS Mind the Gap committee in regards to bridging skill gaps between meteorological curriculum and then what's needed in the private sector. So I think a lot of the effort is currently being done by AMS, and once I stop talking here, I'll drop in the new AMS career resources portal, which is trying to address a lot of these issues about what certain skills are needed for certain industry tracks. What does the salary structure look like for people in certain career tracks or industries, from their early career to their mid-career to their late career, because that informs people what they should, when they're trying to make a decision whether they go to grad school or enter the private sector after their undergrad. Knowing what the compensation is super important for where those people are at in their lives. So having that, what's generally been under the hood, a black box, having that a little bit more open to undergrads so they can make a good decision, I think is very important. So there are things being done by AMS, and I'll drop that link in the chat. But I'll let Alicia and Andrew jump in if they have any thoughts here.
Yeah, so so as the board of private sector meteorologists, the chair, one of the main initiatives is just increasing that transparency between the private sector and students and academia, because I feel like there are a lot of people who are sitting here today or in meteorology programs across the country that don't fully understand, first of all, what jobs can I even get as a meteorologist besides the things that you think about when you go in, like the cookie cutter, traditional NWS, broadcast, et cetera, jobs. There isn't really a lot of emphasis on these developments in the private sector. And not only that, but also I don't think there's a full understanding of, what skills do I actually gain as a meteorologist and how can these be applied to other sectors. So, I think we as private sector meteorologists, we bear the responsibility of giving that information on to these different programs across the country. Mind the Gap is doing a lot with that. I was at their summit last summer, and then I've been kind of trying to incorporate that with the BPSM. So a lot of that goes to, what jobs are available, and then, the salary, because when you go to college, there is a major financial investment. And Max was talking about whether going to grad school is a good investment. I'd argue that, if you're in high school, you need to understand, is a meteorology degree worth it? Is it worth going to this school to pursue this degree if, I'm not even aware of, what I can actually do with it? Because I can tell you, when I went to school, I wasn't aware of any of these weather risk, energy sector, these applied meteorology jobs. And if I had not been aware of that, then I don't know if I would have thought that the degree was worth it. So whatever we can do to provide transparency, also just real life examples, problem sets that can be used in class, kind of giving you a snapshot of the work that we do on a daily basis, and having students figure out, okay, like based on the skills that I learned in the classroom, how can we attack this problem? And understanding, what we do in terms of talking to clients or other people who use our services. So all in all, I'd say just number one goal is to just be more transparent about what we do. And, I think through the BPSM, Mind the Gap, and other programs, there's a lot more that we could do, but there are some really exciting things in the works.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on everything that's been said already. I too was at the Mind the Gap workshop on the private sector side, and it was really great. The small business side of things sometimes gets lost in the, I guess, in the bigger picture of the private sector, because we are such a small little niche. And, we've already talked about some of the skills. I think there's some really good things that are going on. One of the things that impressed me about that workshop is that there were universities represented, and there were really small schools represented. So you could be anywhere from a really large school to a very small department, and there will be people who are engaged with the private sector and professors who are really interested in preparing their students for this type of work. And, I know you may not realize today what you want to be doing as a meteorologist in, however many years until you're employed. And realistically, a lot of people change careers too. So you may not understand that fully, but I would say that everything that's been said about rounding out your experiences and your knowledge during your time in school is super important. And so you want to look for opportunities in your education that are sort of outside of the box, whether it's a minor in something related but not really meteorology, but something that might come in useful, soliciting communication opportunities. And a lot of academic departments provide these kinds of things, whether it's a student TA position or whether you're doing volunteer work talking to undergraduates or younger kids or whatever. There's a lot of opportunities that are already out there. So I think the partnership from the time that I was in school to what I learned about the private sector, I never would have thought I would have been in the private sector, much less had an understanding of what kind of skills I would need to get here. I think it's come leaps and bounds in that time, and it continues to improve. So you really just have to kind of look out for those opportunities within your environment that you're in.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. So I'm going to wait a little bit if someone jump in and ask the question. I don't know if we have more questions in the YouTube channel.
Nothing so far.
Okay. If not, I think maybe we can just move to the closing remarks. If you want to say the last word, if you don't want to say any last word before we close this panel discussion. And so I don't know who wants to start again, but I think maybe Alicia, you want to start with the closing remarks?
Sure. What I always tell students of all ages, really, right from elementary on up at the appropriate age level, of course, is to just seek out opportunities and seek out mentorship in just any area. If an opportunity comes your way, even if it's not something that you think you want to do for a career, take advantage of that opportunity. My internship at the National Weather Service is how I met my former boss. He was at the Weather Service, I was at the Weather Service. I knew I didn't want to go into the Weather Service, but all the years later, after he retired and started the company that I eventually bought, is when we reconnected. So getting to know people and make those connections is absolutely invaluable. And so that's my last words, is just to encourage you to take advantage of any opportunities you can, even if it's something that you may not think that you're interested in.
Yeah, I can jump in here next. So I do want to say that I cannot emphasize enough the importance of mentorship. Like when I was in college, there was a mentorship program from the BPSM, and I consider that to be instrumental in terms of actually getting my foot in the door of the energy sector, which again, as I mentioned before, it's not easy to do that. You need to make these connections. And I'm sure all three of us, like I certainly would be willing to provide my contact information for you guys to reach out with additional questions. And I feel like I have a role that I want to give back to what previous mentors have given to me, and I'd be happy to do that. I mean, my number one thing that's kind of helped me, aside from the mentorship, is just don't be afraid to apply to opportunities, not only like Alicia was saying, that maybe outside of your comfort zone, but also that are far away, to places you've never been. Like me personally, I've moved to 3 different states in well, actually 3 years at this point, because I felt like they were the right opportunities, even though they were places where I was giving up a friend group, I was moving farther away from family. But in the end, I felt like if I'm going to make a move, being in my 20s, this is the time to do so. And I would say, do not let the distance hold you back from what could be a really great opportunity. And that doesn't mean it's a forever thing. Like if you want to be in your hometown or somewhere or some particular city long term, you can always go back in the future. But as far as getting your career off the ground, I think you need to be looking at what's going to give me the best avenue for success, not only right now, but looking 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And that involves being more open-minded than maybe you might think.
All right, I guess I'll round this out. Well, thank you everyone for having us today. And my lasting words of advice here, I would say, and this piggybacks off of what you guys were saying, but just be open-minded to some of those non-traditional roles. If you're struggling to find job titles that say meteorologist, just realize that there's other roles that fit your your educational and your skill background. You learned so much with a meteorology degree, and I don't think people realize how strong their data analysis background is, their communication background is with that degree. It's a really great mix of those computational skills, but also those soft skills as well that you get with a meteorology degree. So if you're not sold on those positions, that's okay, but it still could be worth applying just to get the experience, maybe have some optionality with your career. Interview experience is really important and something that's not easy. So if you're not quite sold on a role that doesn't say meteorologist, maybe just apply anyway and get a little bit of that experience. That never hurts. And I still say all this with the an intent to keep people to make people realize that I think they should still follow their passion. A lot of people get into weather because they have an interest in the field. It was like a spark or flame lit at a young age. So I'm not exactly telling you to stray away from that. And it's important that still drives you in what you do. But just always keep those options open. Lastly, consider volunteering with the American Meteorological Society. There's numerous boards and committees that will take student members. It's a really easy way to meet professionals with specific roles in the field. So if you want to follow that passion and that niche in meteorology, look into one of those committees and reach out to someone. Usually people will get back to you. I found that through my early career, is that when you want advice and you ask for advice, you usually get some good guidance if you reach out to people. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Thanks again for having us today.
Well, I think with that, I just want to say thank you to the students that attend today to this panel discussion and for all the questions. And a huge thank you for the panelists for accepting the invitation to be here and for taking your time. I know you're busy and have a lot of things to do. So I really appreciate to saying yes to be here, and we open this discussion that a lot of people knows about this private sector. So thank you so much. And I think with that, we can then end this panel discussion. And thank you again. So thank you.